Hi everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome to March and welcome to another episode of Mondays with Margaret. Today we will be talking about Margaret Atwood's fifth novel, Bodily Harm. Bodily Harm was originally published in 1981, which means that we have actually officially read the first 2 decades of Atwood's publications, and we are beginning the next 20 years. So I will give a brief synopsis of this book without giving away any spoilers. So if you haven't read it, not to worry. I will also talk about the characters and themes. And because we are starting a new month, I will also share the books that we will be reading in June, and I will update our reading schedule in the description box below. Bodily Harm begins in Toronto, but we travel to the Caribbean island of St. Antoine, which is a fictional place, but with the cold weather we are having, it sounds very warm and tropical. The main character is Rennie, and I found her to be very naive. She is a travel writer. Her boyfriend Jake recently left her. She's had a breast removed because of cancer, and she's now in remission. And she has a mad crush on Daniel, who is her surgeon. She's from a small town called Griswold, Ontario, and when we first meet her, it's because someone has been in her home. They've looked through her things, they've even made themselves an Ovaltine, and most disturbingly, they've left a piece of rope on her bed. And Rennie takes an assignment and travels to St. Antoine for 3 weeks, and partly so she can get away from crazy things happening and also to heal. She meets Dr. Minnow on the plane. He says he is the former tourism minister, and he's always talking about the sweet Canadians. At her first dinner on the island, Rennie meets a man named Paul, who charters boats for the tourists. And he's not staying at the same hotel as her, but he says that the food there is better. So Rennie also meets a woman named Laura, and she befriends both of them during her stay. And during Rennie's time on the island, there are flashbacks to her relationship with Jake, to some memories that she has about her friend Jocasta, and also about her family. And meanwhile, on the island is experiencing a revolution, and somehow Rennie finds herself in the midst of this uprising. And it's almost like the book is a mystery novel, but I wouldn't categorize it in that genre. The mystery has more to do with people's identity and what's going on behind the scenes, I guess you could say. And when it comes to themes, as we've seen in other Atwood novels, identity is a big one. So for Rennie especially, this trip is a way of getting away from her life, and she could really be anyone. So in a way, she's invisible, and she's where no one knows her. And on page 31, the bottom of 31 into 32, it says, she discovers that she's truly no longer at home. She is away. She is out, which is what she wanted. The difference between this and home isn't so much that she knows nobody as that nobody knows her. In a way, she's invisible. In a way, she's safe. In general, and without giving any spoilers away, not everyone is who they say they are, and everyone suspects everyone of something. So it's hard to know who to trust while you're reading. Body is also a theme. Rennie refers to the change in her body often, and there's a desire for healing. So when a German woman is helping someone with a wounded foot, it says on page 190, I think in the bottom paragraph, it says, Rennie, watching, wants to hold out her own foot, even though there's nothing wrong with it, even though it will hurt. She wants to know what it feels like. She wants to put herself into the care of those magic hands. She wants to be cured, miraculously, of everything, of anything at all. There's also an interesting link to her grandmother, who keeps asking where she put her hands. She can never find her hands. And there's kind of this theme of being detached from the body, which we've seen in Atwood's other novels. There's also the theme of death. So for Rennie, it's facing her own mortality, and there are some deaths that take place in the book. Relationships are always a big theme for Atwood as well, and we see this here. Rennie's view of other people is interesting in general. She is constantly, as she calls it, redoing people by judging them based on what they wear and what they look like. And it seems that a lot of Rennie's relationships are strained, I will say, or tense. Her relationship with her mother and even her grandmother seems to be tense. And her relationships with men also seem very unhealthy. After her father leaves, her mother marries Bob, who is not a nice man. And granted, her mother blames Rennie for the way Bob treats her. So that definitely could explain where some of the resentment towards her mother is coming from, and her hesitancy and even her fear of men. Rennie's relationship with Jake becomes increasingly more strained when she gets sick. And her relationship with Daniel, her doctor, is maybe the most healthy, but I think that's more to do with who Daniel is, and even it has some blurred boundaries. And then there is Paul, and that isn't a healthy relationship either. Paul is described as having, very little depth. Laura talks about him as, not being able to go past shaking hands. So the relationships are also talked about between the countries. Atwood does a good job describing how Canadians are perceived. So we see this first with Dr. Minnow. He's constantly calling Canadians the sweet Canadians. They're always polite. But one of the things mentioned that I thought was interesting is when Dr. Minnow is describing a hurricane that happened on the island, he talks about how kind Canada was because they sent tons of tin ham. And he said the problem was that the refugees never saw it. And I think this is a common mistake that people and countries make. We often think that we are helping, but we haven't actually asked what the real needs are. And we just think we know, right? So this only adds to waste because the countries need to communicate to one another. So finally, the last theme I want to talk about is one that also shows up in various ways in Atwood's writing, at least so far. It could probably be broken down into several themes, but that is the treatment and expectation of women. So Rennie doesn't like the idea of having to be dutiful. We learn this when she describes the relationship between her grandmother and grandfather, her mother and father, and even in her own relationships. At one point, she compares Daniel to Griswold, Ontario, because he is what is expected and doing his duty. Atwood touches upon various topics such as sex, porn, rape culture, and violence. And as far as themes go, this is classic Atwood. I think it's about our own personal growth, how we change within ourselves. And on page 301, this is summed up quite well. Let me just turn to the page here. So, it says, the ginger ale tastes the same as it used to. The ice cubes are the same, frozen with holes in them. She notes these details the way she has always noted them. What she sees has not altered, only the way she sees it. It's all exactly the same. Nothing is the same. She feels as if she's returning after a space trip, a trip into the future. It's her that's been changed, but it will seem as if everyone else has. There's been a warp. They've been living in a different time. And I don't know about you, but if you love to travel, I often feel this way, returning from a trip where I feel like something has changed and it feels like the world has changed, but really it's my own perspective on things and what I've learned on that trip. So I could definitely identify with that part. I still didn't feel a lot of connection to the characters. And out of all of the novels that we've read so far, this is the one that I have enjoyed the least. I didn't think it was as well written as Life Before Man and some of her earlier work. It started off okay for me, and I think that there was potential to have more depth. But once it became more about the uprising, I kind of lost some interest. And again, without any spoilers, I will say that I did like how the people I suspected were suspecting someone else and showed how it looked from their point of view. I thought that that was very clever. It was very well done. So we have now officially begun Mondays with Margaret in March. And I'm now going to go through the next few books in our reading schedule. Right now it goes until the end of May. So beginning on June the 7th, we will be reading 4 children's books. And this is where we go a little bit off of our publication order. And we will begin with Princess Prunella and the Purple Peanut, which was published in 1995. Then Rude Ramsey and the Roaring Radishes, published in 2003. Next is Bashful Bob and Doleful Dorinda, published in 2004. And finally, Wandering Wenda and Widow Wallop's Wonderground Washery, published in 2011. Now, if you have all of these as children's books, that's awesome. If not, you can also get a trio of Tolerable Tales, which has the last 3 books in one and is much easier to find. So we then have 2 novels back to back, and I think this is the only time that we have that much reading at once. So on June 14th, we have Elias Grace, which was originally published in 1996. And then we have The Blind Assassin, which was originally published in 2000. And finally, we will end the month of June with a nonfiction book on writers and writing, originally published in 2002. Now, this has also been published under the name Negotiating with the Dead. So if you have that, then it's the same thing. On writers and writing is easier to find now, and I am waiting for my copy to arrive, I'm hoping sometime this week, and that will bring us into the summer months already. So please let me know what you thought of Bodily Harm. What did you think of the characters, the story, the themes? Check out the reading schedule below, and if you have any questions about getting those books, please let me know. I will leave everything in the description box. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.